My biggest source of inspiration, particularly in the latter half of my career, has been focusing on my personal purpose, which is to connect people to solve problems and improve lives. One of the challenges I had was when a lot of organizations started moving applications to the cloud. I had to get on board and convince and educate and build teams that knew how to operate in this new way of working. Really anchoring back on that personal purpose. It's helped me when times have gotten hard and challenging to remind myself we must grow, we must evolve.
Welcome back to CEO Tech Live. Today, we have a treat coming your way with Diana Lee Caplinger, who is Managing Director, Systems of Action at KPMG. She leads the ServiceNow, Microsoft, MuleSoft, and niche applications. She's previously served as a Senior Executive too for Truist and SunTrust, and she's also been a recipient of the Atlanta Business Chronicles Women in Tech Women of the Year Award. Diana, welcome to CEO Tech Live.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So this really cool title with KPMG, they probably heard the term Systems of Action. What is Systems of Action and why does it matter so much to organizations?
Yes. It's a collection of technology applications that employees, internal KPMG employees use to perform an action, simply stated. So Office 365, digital workflows and automations to help accelerate and make work more effective. All of that's bundled under Systems of Action.
Wow. So y'all, you're hearing that she's in charge of probably working on the stuff that you're working on right now, maybe even to listen to this very interview. And people might be thinking, holy cow, artificial intelligence, I'm seeing these prompts pop up. All of this, AI is sort of infusing every single thing probably that you're working on right now. And before we get into your background, maybe share with us, what does the future look like?
Yeah, digital transformation has been happening for many years. You couple traditional AI models like machine learning with generative AI and large language models, and we are seeing an explosion of ways to operate differently, new ways of working, new ways to think about work, and new tools to put in our toolkit to help accelerate work, whether it's how we connect, whether it's how we communicate, or whether how we express ourselves and solve business challenges.
Yeah, so good. I think so many organizations are so focused with the end product of what they do, what they create, but they don't necessarily think about the tools that they're using for how to do it, right? And that's where you come in, because that's where a lot of this transformation is taking place, is the how.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ben. And the how is becoming an exponential figure because of all the tools I just listed and how we apply them to our own communities within our organizations, and then how we show up in the communities that we serve.
Yeah, such a good point. Yeah, I really hope listeners from CEO Tech Live, they're thinking about this for their teams, right? They're thinking about tech, they're thinking about all these things in their organization, but yeah, what are the tools they're doing to actually do the work? And if there's more effective ways to do it in a more integrated fashion, they can save a lot of time and money that way, and probably a lot of frustration too.
Absolutely.
Well, so diving into your background, I had a blast looking at Diana's background. A lot of, I'll say, big brands. I already mentioned a couple of the ones, Truist and SunTrust, and even NASA snuck on there. And as I was looking through your work experience, that was the first thing I saw. Now, my first job, I think, was like as a lifeguard. And then I got into industrial engineering for a textile organization. But very few people start out with NASA. What was that like?
Yeah, it was exciting. It was fun. I had a full access security badge at Kennedy Space Center. So I would say some of the most exciting 5 months of my life, going to Launchpad A, Launchpad B, seeing the vertical assembly building, being in the building and watching the single rocket boosters being put together, actually sitting in the external tank area inside of Launchpad B with Discovery in a vertical position. So I've been really, really fortunate and very blessed to be inside of Orbiter, Discovery, and Endeavor, and just soak it all in. I was a quality engineer. I wrote DOS programs to help engineers who were evaluating the density of these 6 orbiter windows And I would run the DOS program to take the information so it was easier for them to determine if that window needed to be replaced before that orbiter went back up in space. So
Oh, so
very
you were the OG of systems of action for NASA, it sounds like. Because that's what y'all, come on.
I'm all for
I
it.
can see the pattern. Oh,
Absolutely.
so if there's like one lesson, like thinking back to that, or one big takeaway that's helped your career from that first role, what would it be?
Be inquisitive.
Hmm.
Ask every single question, be a sponge, soak it all in, learn the different perspectives, talk to the different leaders, talk to the engineers that are in there in a suit with their glasses toggled, sorry, their glasses adhered to them because they're thinking about once that orbiter's in space and there's zero gravity, what could end up floating in the air. And engineering
Hmm.
around that and how they're solving for that and keeping the astronauts safe. Thinking about the grounds team and how Kennedy Space Center is a national wildlife refuge. So there are alligators,
Hmm.
there are all these animals you
Yeah.
would not expect to see when you're leaving work or coming into work in the morning, right? And how you respect the environment.
Hmm.
And we're all just in this ecosystem moving about our day. So just be
Wow.
inquisitive.
Yeah, such good advice. And it's a good reminder because CEO Tech Live and a lot of leaders roll in and they're like, hey, I got to have the answers. I'm one of the top executives. And just the humility and humbleness to stay and that inquisitiveness, I just see it playing out helpful for your career, but it sets a great example for your team to stay in that place when they see you role modeling it.
Absolutely.
Oh, oh my goodness.
Absolutely. There's so many different considerations. And as we have moved up in organizations, we use our gut feeling and marry it with empirical data to help inform decisions. But there's
Hmm.
always an incremental or accretive vantage points that we can think about to help
Hmm.
us expand our solutioning and how we drive organizations forward.
But over the years, what's been your biggest source of inspiration and when's a challenging time that it got you through?
My biggest source of inspiration, particularly in the latter half of my career, has been focusing on my personal purpose, which is
Hmm.
to connect people to solve problems and improve lives. So I anchor on that very intentionally because it can show up and manifest in different ways. It could
Hmm.
mean something as simple as helping a junior employee with assigning them to a project that they may be apprehensive about, but it
Hmm.
expands their skills and their knowledge in a different way. It could mean embarking on an endeavor or a POC that may not be the cheapest POC, but the end results could just help us really take something new and fresh and do something differently. So for
Hmm.
me, it's really anchoring on that purpose, making sure that I am leveraging professionally my network to help people improve lives and solve problems, but internally within the organization, sitting down, listening, hearing where people want to go from a career trajectory standpoint,
Hmm.
helping to them to chart out the path and think of things they hadn't thought about. So, really anchoring back on that personal purpose has helped me because not only has it helped me live out my purpose, but it's helped me when times have gotten hard and challenging to remind myself what I'm doing, why I do it, and use the gifts and talents that I have to not only make sure that, post COVID, every year seems like it's a different year, and every year feels like a decade. And so when we think about why we're doing what we're doing, how do we help our organizations and our businesses thrive? How do we navigate the challenging times that are before us, whether it's something cybersecurity related or using new technology without having to compromise your own personal data? Just all these additional incremental considerations that every year there's incremental considerations that we must make. And so, we think about those challenges, but staying anchored in your personal purpose helps navigate through those challenges so you still show up as your whole self and you're leading the path for others that can follow.
And I think as leaders, it's easy to get lost in the details, in the routine, and in the routine of the day to day, and forget to tie it back to a personal mission. And that's where things can get crazy because I think about like systems of action and your responsibilities and the technology you've been involved in. It would be so easy to just get off solving a problem that may not be the right problem and to anchor back to that, hey, what's the problem we're solving here? Is it one that matters? Is it helping others? Because man, I feel like the stories of technology in the world of being created and then not having a problem to really solve or a relevant problem are numerous. And having that can really help anchor back. I'm curious, when in your career did you discover or detect this mission? Was it early on? Did you have a mentor that helped you, or was there like a book along the way, or it just sort of evolved as you worked along?
Several books along the way, several mentors, a couple executive coaches,
Yeah.
a couple corporate sponsors. And so I've always had that personal board of directors. And then there's the people that have been in those roles that I've mentioned have helped me along the way to really frame up who is Diana? How does Diana want to show up? And what impact and legacy do I want to leading in these different high profile positions and organizations that I've been really fortunate to work for. And when you think about it from that lens, you realize someone's always watching. You're probably more than likely helping someone, whether you realize it or not. And so, how do you be a little bit more intentional in how you operate? Because you may be going through challenges, but so is everyone else. The organization will set out their strategic plan, and then 2 months into the year, something new comes up that has to be added to. So it's a
Mhm.
prioritization discussion. There's a value matrix and business value discussion, and so you are constantly taking in information and using information to help make informed decisions. And it's just a constant cycle. So it is an interesting time. And we need new tools in our toolkit to help us stay sharp and stay ahead of a curve so we're not left behind.
Thinking back in your career, was there a decision you made or a specific challenge that you really felt like, yeah, because I had that personal mission identified and I was able to anchor back on that, it really helped us accelerate through it in a positive way?
Yeah, I will say one of the challenges I had was when a lot of organizations started moving applications to the cloud. So you had to think about where you want to take it. You had to build out new controls and monitoring and alerts and processes to support what now you didn't wholly own the location and the servers. You had to
Yeah.
build out new processes, right? And really educate and build teams that knew how to operate in this new way of working. And it's a competing values framework. You have a team is anchored on this is the way we do it. This is safe, it's secure, it's repeatable. You have a team that said, we want to enhance and embrace this new investment we're making, so fully leverage all these new capabilities. And you have all these other teams that are anchored in their quadrant of the competing values framework. And so for that team that's anchored on this is how we do it, we press the button to move X, Y, and Z, the code to production. Well, we don't need you to do that anymore because DevSecOps removes the need for a human to be in the loop and for
Mm,
one team, the whole entire organization to be that one team to press the button. You don't need it anymore. And so, how do you operate keeping those
mm,
teams feeling as if they've contributed,
mm.
their needs are met, we're safe, we're secure, we're still applying controls. And
Yes.
so, yeah, for me, that was a challenge because we still had to meet dates and still had to get it done. But everyone was coming from their own
Mm,
individual vantage points with the concerns or best ways of working, but it was all new.
mm.
And so it was a challenge, but we got it done and we made it happen. And a lot of it was, the Competing Values Framework is a book I always reference. Also, thinking about growth mindset and reminding everyone to have a growth mindset. We can't stay static.
Mm.
The companies that have stayed static are no longer top 10, top 50 organizations anymore. We must grow. We must evolve. We must think about our products and services differently. And so that was a challenge that really brought it home for me. And I really had to leverage the leaders that I had before me in front of me. I had to leverage the education I had, just not just formal, but education along the way to get things done, while also thinking about what's important in the motivators and drivers for different leaders that I had to get on board and convince and get comfortable with this new way of operating.
Love it. Y'all, the technology part is much easier than the human part, right? And you can't forget to just focus on the human, not the technology, or vice versa. And what a great story about that. And you could think about your personal mission, about the problem, but also how you're helping others through this. And I really liked how I kind of initially thought you were going to be thinking about, well, how are we helping the customer? But you knew how you're helping the customer. It's like, how are we helping the team that's in charge of this whole thing progress through this in a positive and productive way, and in a way that they feel taken care of and safe, because you want the best product, but you want them to stick around. I mean, what an education experience too for them to go through. And you want that team to survive that because they've been through a great learning experience. You want them to stick around and help apply it positively to other projects.
Absolutely.
Man, so good. That's like a little mini MBA. And I also want to point out what a great piece to think about too, pairing. What struck me is, hey, she's done the work, she has the education piece, but you've got, I guess, the street smarts, for lack of a better word, right? Learning from your environment, learning through navigating the organization. And that's also a really important thing that leaders got to think about, helping retain your team that's developed that great inner working of the organization. Kind of a fun question here. What's the worst leadership advice you've heard?
There's been a lot. So,
That's a whole other book. That's one other podcast, Ben. Worst leadership advice.
yeah, for me, it's been leaders that anchor, I think, too heavily on one specific organization,
Hmm.
where every organization has its own culture. And we know culture is very, very strong. But when we look at everything, we can't look at it from a singular point of view and purely anchor on it because one, how something may work in an organization A, but may not work at all in organization B.
Yeah. Hmm.
So just being very limited in the approach and in thinking about you're at organization A, yes, but something that organization B, C, D may have faced the same challenge. There may be something you can learn and take from that, even though the culture is different, right? Let's not always try to embark upon something that as if we're the first person to do it. And that does exist, don't get me wrong, but there's still something else that you can learn along the way, whether it could be a better way to ask for pricing for the SaaS service that you need to use or to leverage or enable. Maybe it's something around the way that the pricing model is set up, whether it's subscription based or something else, right? So, some of the leadership advice I've gotten where it was just singularly focused on this is how we do it at the organization, and that's the only way you can be successful, is not necessarily true. And it leads you down a path where you automatically put up blinders that don't end up serving you well in the long run.
What do you think your role is when it comes to culture and the teams that you lead?
It depends. In some roles, I have been placed in that role to be a change agent
Hmm.
or a disruptor.
Okay.
I lead a
All right.
number of back office, middle office transformation initiatives. So if we know that we have these new tools we talked about earlier, change is constantly happening and it's accelerating. So if you are in a role or a position or in a team that you are doing a transformation, then you are a change agent. And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to feel very uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because to be successful in organizational change management, you need to be aware of the culture, but you also have to help the culture shift.
So let's imagine, well, I guess you don't have to imagine because you've done it. You guys shift some culture and you're there for that. Again, that seems like a big rock to move because it might have been a culture that has emerged over a decade or more. What's your playbook or your first step for leaders to, okay, I'm here to make a change in culture. Where do you go next?
I start off with a quote. A CFO of a large, very, very large organization said something, and I loved it. And so I'm going to answer the question starting with a quote. And
Hmm.
he said, "You can't win the fight without getting punched in the face."
Ouch.
Ouch, but it's also very, very true.
It's
Particularly when
it's a
you're,
contact sport.
it's a mental contact sport.
I gotta say that quote surprised me, but it is true. Hey, calibrate your expectations.
And prepare yourself physically and mentally for the challenges that are coming, because doing transformation, particularly digital transformation, that means something has to change. You're evolving. and just putting in the new glossy computer system or SaaS system, no one's going to use it. No one's going to care. We have all the data around low adoption. We
Hmm.
have a lot of data around failed digital transformation
Yes.
because it anchors back on what you previously mentioned, people process technology.
Hmm. Yeah,
And so change is hard, particularly in organizations. These organizations have thrived because they have a strong culture. And so when you have to evolve and do these new things, you got to get prepared to get punched in the face.
yeah, I love it. A lot of good things you ought to think about from a CEO Tech Live audience on that. But is just to really help you and your team understand the expectations. I think people, maybe the executive knows what's coming, but sometimes they don't do a good job of preparing the team. Hey, this is going to be a challenge. And you don't want them to just shut down and lose and get disheartened at the first obstacle they encounter during a technology change. Right. And one thing that strikes me today about this interview, Diana, is that we talked about the rate of change and the pace of change. And it just seems like digital change is never stopping. There's not really a status quo. And it's just like, hey, this is the cycle. If we get used to this pace, it can be a fun environment if we embrace it versus fight it. Uh,
Absolutely. Expectations of technology because of our high exposure with our own personal devices, and then what we're always reading and hearing, what's now enabled and made available professionally in our work environment. It's going to be a constant push to do more, to be more effective, to be more efficient, a constant push for us to not only continue to enable the best quality services for our clients, but then also for our employees. Our employees expect the best of the best, whether it's a device or some other way of working. And so you have to think about how are you learning? How are you staying ahead of that curve? And then what are your vendors doing to help you stay ahead of that curve as they have greater exposure sometimes to different firms globally or different unique
yeah.
situations? How are they bringing that forth to help you as well and incorporate that?
Yeah, I really like that. And you said something, hey, we have to keep the conversation going because if you're not, I think the world of technology has changed so much too, where you'd have like this big, huge list of vendors and you would just be doing all these bid activities. But if you get lost in that cycle, you lose the conversation sometimes. You're not focusing on expectations and building those closer linkages so your suppliers can be ready to support your needs. And if to the leaders out there, right, if you're not having dialogue, tight knit dialogue with your key suppliers, you're missing a huge opportunity. And I suspect, I mean, like an organization oftentimes can only run as fast as their key suppliers run, right? Because you're going to be running out here and you're not going to have the support grid. I mean, it's
Well,
a
it depends, right? At KPMG, I also have our own KPMG teams like advisory. So I leverage and work with both of them, right? And so
nice.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting to see what's happening in the marketplace, client facing, talking to our KPMG advisory partners, talking to other leaders working in different industries and verticals. So I'm very, very fortunate to be in a role that I have that high exposure that I can learn and glean from to incorporate into how my team and I show up and work.
Yeah. Love that. Well, Diana, it has been a fun one today from NASA to digital transformation. I mean, we covered a lot of ground. What's your parting thought for our listeners today?
For the listeners, I would say you probably have heard multiple times take the risk. I would say take the risk and take the time. Carve out time, a couple of hours a day, to learn for yourself. I'm not
Hmm.
saying go back and go be a developer again, but learn how to write prompts,
Hmm.
learn how to play with prompts, play with the different tools. You'll be very surprised on those learnings and how you then can incorporate it. Something
Hmm.
I started playing with was using generative AI to plan out social events for my friends and family. And
Ew, I love
better,
it.
maybe better at prompt writing when I wanted to write prompts for in the office place.
Yeah, I love it. And okay, I want to ask you about those social occasions. I think that's really cool. But a lot of times as leaders too, we get so focused on the work, we lose the play aspect of like exploring. Like I'm thinking of like the Steve Jobs days of like, hey, you're playing with the iPhone, we're playing, we're playing with the devices, we're learning them, we're getting in lots of different ways. And I think from a technology standpoint, it's easy for executives to get so focused on the project outcome, you forget to play with the technology and really dive into it and learn. So I love the social idea. So what can you give us some background on what you challenged chat to come up with you for? How did it help you plan your event?
Yeah, I wanted to plan dinner with some friends and I wanted it to pick the restaurant. I gave it the price point, the location, and then organize a time for all of us to be there and then what we would do.
And what was the
It was
outcome?
great. And it was great. We had a great time.
So did you share with your friends?
I did because I think everyone should learn how to become a prompt engineer and learn how to write prompts. And it's easy to do. And we already have the tools at our fingertips to do so.
So it is fun and it's really to think about, right? So I know people are playing with thinking about this, but how your organization is learning to write prompts is important. And you can take there's trainings, there's articles, but I mean, there's nothing like doing it yourself, right?
Particularly when it's easy to do and it's already in your hands.
Yeah. All right. All right. So y'all go out, play with whatever tool it is that you're leading the change on. That's always important. And now you've got an idea for your next social event. Diana, thank you for coming on CEO Tech Live.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been great.